Hello, everyone, and welcome to our unit on the legislative branch. This will be the first unit that we do on the three branches of our government. In this unit, we'll be covering mostly information from chapters 5 and 6 with a couple of little things covered in chapter 7 of our textbook. So let's get started. We're going to talk about congressional membership today, and here we go. All right, so when talking about our legislative branch at the national level, you need to first understand how their sessions are broken down. Well, we have what's called a bicameral legislature, which means we have two houses. The two houses are the House of Representatives and the Senate. Now, each term begins on January 3rd of odd years every 2 years. And that corresponds with the election cycles that we actually have take place. And then each term is divided into two sessions of 1 year each. Now, when our Congress is in session, they can vote to adjourn for a period of time. They don't necessarily do this as much as they used to, given modern transportation and the variety of issues that we face on a daily basis, but they can do that if necessary. And then also part of the checks and balances system that is with this, if they do vote to adjourn, the president can call them back if necessary. And the president has done that on quite a few occasions throughout our history. Now, House members, we'll start with the House of Representatives and then work our way to the Senate today. So in the House of Representatives, it's determined by what's called apportionment. Now, what that means is they apportion value in terms of representation according to the population that we have across the country. Now, there's no set number except for one in terms of what a state can get in representation in the House of Representatives. Now, the reason why this is twofold. One is you want to have every state, regardless if they have one person to 300 million or whatever, they have a person representing them in the House. And then two, you also want states that have more population to have greater representation. That's the point of the House of Representatives. It's representative based on the population. Now, there are three main qualifications that you have to have as a member of the House to become a member of the House of Representatives. You have to be at least 25 years of age. You have to be a United States citizen for at least the previous 7 years. So you do not have to be born a U.S. citizen to become a member of the House of Representatives. You just have to be one 7 years prior to your election or running for it. And you have to be a legal resident of the state that you are running in. Now, the term of office for House of Representatives is 2 years. Their elections come every November of even years on that first full Tuesday. Now, roughly in the history, if you go back and look at our House of Representatives at the national level, about 90% are retained when they're up for re-election. And we'll get into some of those factors a little bit later. Now, if there's an instance where a member of the House of Representatives dies while they're in office, or they have to resign, or they, for whatever reason, medical, criminal, whatever, there can be a special election held, and that's pretty common across most of our government offices at the national and state levels, and even local levels. Now, our representation in the House of Representatives is set at 435 members. It cannot actually, we have it set so it cannot go below or above that, and you assign representation through apportionment based on those 435 members every 10 years based on the census, which is crucial because this year we're doing the census. As of yesterday, you should have completed it on April 1st online, and then if you hadn't, they're sending flyers out, and then if that still can't get it, they'll actually send people to your house to watch it, or to go through the census with you. It doesn't take very long. And then from there, once they gather all the information, then they determine your representation by reapportioning the population according to where it went or where it moved to in the previous 10 years, from 2010 to 2020 or whatever decade you're looking at. All right, here you can actually see the population change between the 2000 census and the 2010 census. This is the most recent one that we have. Hopefully we'll have a map out here pretty soon for 2010 to 2020 because that's what they're doing right now. But you can see that the percentage changes where people are moving to are in the darker redder areas, and then the bluer areas where people are losing. And you can see, whereas if you look at, in the case of where we are here in the state of Michigan, um, Jackson County is right here. And we actually gained some people, but if you guys look, you can see that there's a lot of people moving to the west, and there's a lot of people moving to the southeast into Texas areas, in terms of the changes. Okay. And then here, this is actually to show you in much simpler terms just the reapportionment in terms of which states, by looking at the 2000 between the 2000 and 2010 census, where representation actually went. It backs up where I just said where people are going. And you can see in the southeast and to the west, that's where the seats are being gained, whereas in the Midwest and the Northeast, that's where seats are being lost. And that's a significant thing, not just for political reasons, but here in the state of Michigan, we're losing people, and that's unfortunate for us. We've lost some representation, and it's reflected in other ways in terms of like federal aid, jobs that are here, and so forth. Now, House members. So when they reapportion and go through all this stuff each 10 years, you can actually, if there's a change, it actually can lead to what's known as called redistricting. And redistricting is simply based on where you take the census and you redraw the lines of each representative district based on population, with the idea being that when you draw a district, it's not about the geographic size of it, it's about the population that's in it. So like, for example, you might go look at a district map of the state of Michigan or California or New York City or New York, and you could see like New York City is like 3 districts, but the rest of the state is 20 or whatever. Or like here in the state of Michigan, a district resides over the Hearst district is the entire Upper Peninsula, but you have a district here, where we live in Jackson County that's parts of a few counties, or a district in Detroit, which is a much smaller geographic area. The whole idea is that the population is fairly similar. Now, there is some abuse going on with redistricting. There's several redistricting cases across the history of our country, and it's based on drawing districts unfairly due to population. Or more importantly, and this is a big issue, and you might see people out asking, hey, let's try to end this, and I believe it should be ended, is gerrymandering. And it's where the controlling power, whether it's Republican, Democrat, or any other political party in our history or in the future, where they actually use their controlling powers to redraw districts in their favor. Now, the obvious reason why this is significant is because that means that they are going to more easily win re-election for either themselves or for that party as the time goes on. And there's 2 ways they do this. And if you look at the bottom pictures there, the bottom squares, those are examples of what we call in gerrymandering packing and cracking. Now, the one on the left is an idea of packing, and the other one on the right is the idea of cracking, even though they actually have the same number of green and pink circles. So the idea behind packing is where you draw lines to include many opponents into one district. It's like, okay, we see that this is a hotbed for this political party. Why don't we draw this into one district? Not focus on the geographic size, not focus on the actual population. And what this does is it will actually open it up to redrawing districts more easily for the other party or other political parties to get better representation and better chances at election. Now, cracking is doing the exact opposite. So instead of trying to draw lines around one specific group or hotbed, is you actually go draw lines through that and kind of piece it off and crack that group up into small, so they'd be smaller portions or smaller percentages of other districts, so they would have unequal representation. So these are 2 really big problems that we have in terms of representation, and hopefully that we'll be able to kind of solve these as we go forward. And we've seen this in quite a bit in local elections and in national elections at times. Just in the last, I believe in 2018, or it was 16, I can't really directly remember, we actually had gerrymandering laws that were up for a vote. All right, now on to the Senate here. The Senate is very similar to the House of Representatives in its guidelines, but they're just changed a little bit. So where the House of Representatives is based completely on population, which is why it has 435 members. The Senate is limited to 2 representatives per state. And that means you have 100 total. 2 representatives per state, 50 states gets you to your number of 100. Now, the qualifications are just tweaked a little bit from the House of Representatives. So you have to be 30 years old instead of 25. You have to be a citizen for 9 years instead of 7. And really the only reason why it's different between 9 and 7, or 7 and 9, is because of the differences in terms of the election cycles for a representative. They serve 2 years, so they just added that on. You still have to be a legal resident of the state that you're representing. And here's the big difference, is that you have to, when you're running for Senate to become a Senate member, and when you become a member of the Senate, if you win, you're representing the state as a whole. So it's a statewide election. So that means somebody in northern Michigan is going to have it on their ballot for the Senate, just like somebody in southern Michigan is. Whereas in the representative case, you're voting just for who you are, who's representing your district, specifically where you're at. And they only are supposed to really represent your or their people. Now, the term of office, instead of being 2 years, is 6. Elections are held in the exact same time frame, November of even years, and the first full Tuesday of that month. Now, where it is a little bit different is that only 1/3 of the senator base is up for re-election every 2 years. And the reason why this is so that across the legislative branch, and also if you include the presidency or the executive branch, you have some form of continuity in our government that stays there, so that people can function much more effectively and people can learn. Because theoretically, even though we know that most members of the Senate and the House of Representatives get reelected, theoretically every 2 years they could all be new, and they want to make sure that there's some kind of continuity there. And then if there is a death or resignation because the Senate members represent the entire state, there can be a special election, just like in the case of the House of Representatives, or the governor can appoint a Senate member because they represent the entire state. Salaries and benefits, we'll go through this pretty quickly. You guys can read this. It'll be much easier for you. So the senators and representatives, even though this is Senate, they do get a lot of benefits, such as medical insurance and care. They get trips to the gym. They get trip allowances. Now, the 2 big things here is they are eligible for a $150,000 a year pension if they retire. Most don't take it because they keep getting reelected. And then there's the 27th Amendment, which is the last amendment we've added to our Constitution, which is where congressional members can't pay, they can't set their pay as a sitting member. Essentially, they can vote for future pay increases. They can't vote for a pay increase at that moment. They can only vote for it in upcoming terms, which means they directly aren't increasing their pay level at that time. Although they essentially are, because they're going to get reelected. Most get reelected. They also get several privileges. They can be censured, which is actually not necessarily a privilege. They can actually it's a punishment. But they can, one big privilege is they are free from arrest, except if it's in a case of treason or breach of peace, while Senate or the House of Representatives in session. The reason why that is so that they can keep the government enacting. That doesn't mean that they can't be tried for crimes. It just means that while they're sitting, they have to be able to do what they need to do. And then, most importantly, it's the second one there. They can't be sued for anything said while in session is very important. And that's just so that they can speak freely and discuss things, because they're going to be talking about crucial issues and things that are facing our country. All right, so just a quick overview of the membership of Congress. We have 535 voters in our Congress. There's 100 senators, 435 representatives. There are also 5 other people that are members of Congress. You have 4 House delegates. They represent each of the districts or territories that we have as a country. D.C., Guam, American Samoa, and the Virgin Islands. And then with that, to add in the other territory that we have, Puerto Rico, they're the resident commissioner. It kind of presides over that group of 5. They can't vote on the floor of Congress, but they can do everything else. They can speak, they can vote in committees, they can search out leadership and talk to them. They can introduce they can introduce bills or other laws, and so forth. They just can't vote because they don't have full statehood. Now, characteristics of our memberships of Congress: about half are lawyers. The real reason should be obvious, that they're dealing with law, they're dealing with government ideas. They should have a background of it. They're typically white, middle-aged males over 50, or right around 50. Now, this is slowly changing because we're becoming a more diverse, more open country, where you're seeing more women that are being represented, you're seeing younger people that are coming in, and you're seeing more minorities that are getting represented in their districts and in their states. Now, again, like I've said several times here, most are reelected. Reasons why are these advantages that you see on screen. It's easier for somebody that has been in place to raise funds. Now, in a negative light, gerrymandering can help them in a lot of ways. But the other parts are they're known to voters. I mean, I've talked to you guys about several times how a lot of times people will vote for people they know, and they won't actually seek out what they actually do, and that happens. Now, that's not for everybody. I'm not saying that's how everybody gets reelected, but it can benefit them. And you can see that they try to solve problems. There's a record there. I mean, you guys can go on the Senate's website, the House of Representatives website, look up any person across the country that's been a member or currently is a member and see what they're working on, and that helps. And then generally the people get reelected because of the funding and because they're known to voters, but also because they generally, for the most case, they do represent the views of the people that they're representing. I mean, it's not like people move all the time in droves to either to or from an area that completely can shift the representation or the views of that place all at once. So in a short 2-6 year period, you might see re-election to be a lot easier. So that goes along the lines of why it's a lot easier for people to get reelected. All right, one last slide here is campaigning. We're seeing campaigning in every form. You guys know this. Television and radio are still the dominant forms of campaigning, but that's slowly changing, specifically or actually quickly changing, I apologize, for radio as the internet's coming in. It's being used more often. It's more advantageous because you have electronic brochures. It's accessible 24 hours a day. You can broadcast events or speeches where people can't necessarily get to them. And you can have recruiting and raising funds drives on the internet, and so forth. Now, it's still not used as often as the television because of the fact that the highest percentage of people that actually vote are the elderly or people that are older, and they aren't as necessarily technologically savvy. But this is slowly changing in that group to where that's not becoming as much of a challenge. And then obviously the generation that I'm a part of and that you're a part of, technology is a much more accessible way to campaign because we're going to see it more often and we're used to using that stuff. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was an informative lecture on congressional membership, and I will see you later with our next topic in Chapter 5 on Congress. Have a great day.